In this video I am going to show you images of some places in the northeast of Mallorca. I will stop at Puerto de Pollença, then I will drive along the winding road that leads to Formentor beach. Finally we will visit some sectors of the Alcudia beach and Playa de Muro. The images were filmed on June 18. The north of Mallorca, in addition to being one of the most beautiful areas of the island thanks to its natural landscape, it is home to some of the towns most steeped in history and tradition in Mallorca. This is the case of Pollença and Alcudia, two towns marked by a long history of occupation and battles between Phoenicians and Greeks, who were the ones who occupied them, against Vandals, Byzantines and Arabs who tried to conquer them. Alcudia was established in 123 BC as a Roman settlement called Pollença, and in the center of the city is the only fully preserved wall in all of Mallorca. Pollença, for its part, was founded in 1229 by King Jaime I, and its history is marked by the night of May 30 to 31, 1550, the date on which the Moorish troops of the pirate Dragut attacked the town. The battle resulted in the victory of the Christian militias. This road that leads us to Formentor beach and then towards the Lighthouse, was together with the incredible road to La Calobra, one of the masterpieces of the engineer Antonio Parietti. An engineer who made the end of the Mallorcan world accessible. In 1925 one of his most recognized projects came to him, the first highway from Puerto de Pollença to Formentor. A crucial factor for a done deal to decide on the construction of the famous hotel. In 1910, after having graduated as a lawyer, the Argentinian Adam Deal, a 22-year-old young man with a great economic fortune, started a world tour that would end in Paris due to his interest in learning about the literary movements of the moment, joining the Nouvelle Revue Française, before returning to Buenos Aires. In 1915, he decided to return to Paris as a war correspondent, where he met the famous painter Anglada Camarasa, whose painting, Formentor After the Storm, made a strong impression on him. This friendship with the Mallorcan poet led him to visit Pollença in 1921. There he met the Mallorcan poet Miquel Costa and Llobera. The understanding was instantaneous between the two, due to the fact that they were both Bachelor of Laws and poets. The family of the Mallorcan writer was also the owner of the lands of Formentor since 1646, and Adon Deal, in love with the wild natural beauty of the area, managed to buy them for 520,000 pesetas at the time, an operation facilitated by the fact that Miquel Costa had decided to consecrate his life to the church. The Buenosarian poet had the vision and the impulse to create a hotel of great style, to turn it into a meeting point for painters and writers, inviting those who did not have the means to pay for their stay. He invested his enormous fortune in its construction and in solving the many difficulties to make it viable, such as the lack of access by road, electricity, water or telephone. After fierce efforts, in 1930, with the assistance of the island's living forces, the 50-room hotel was inaugurated, all of them equipped with heating and hot water. There was no lack of detail to achieve the greatest refinement: manicured gardens, exquisite restoration, linen tablecloths and beautiful tableware, served by very attentive staff. The farm even had a golf course that, even though it was built, was never used because it could not get enough water for its maintenance. Deal had planned everything so that no delicacy was missing, everything except its medium-term viability, due to its joyous waste in the name of good taste. We are talking about the year 1929, difficult times for upper-class tourists. Affected by multiple crises, above all by the consequences of the Wall Street stock market crash. The financial institution Credito Balear became the new owner of the property, and Adam Deal abandoned Mallorca, but he left something behind on the island, an unquestionable emblematic hotel, Hotel Formentor, which even today is still a symbol of category. Adam Deal got to know Pollença port in the first wave of artists and intellectuals who arrived in Pollença from all over the world. He was so fascinated by this part of the island that he opened a hotel with just 70 guests. Famous people such as Tito Cittadini, the Count of Kaiserling, Princes of Wales, Winston Churchill, Charles Chaplin, Reynaldo Luza, Douglas Fairbanks, etc., have all stayed here. Deal announced the hotel with a great ceremony among the entire European aristocracy, achieving that in a short time it would become a meeting place for illustrious visitors who arrived in Palma by motor ship or plane, as well as a focus of culture and leisure of the lineage. His success was such that in 1932 he asked the famous architect Le Corbusier, father of the so-called international style, to visit the hotel in order to project its expansion, which he was ultimately not in charge of. Deal's dream drained his great fortune and lasted only 7 years. Harassed by banks, in his search for financing he made the mistake of authorizing the installation of a roulette wheel for 2 Dutch citizens who turned out to be real swindlers, being forced to sell their possessions and hand over the hotel as payment. Soon after, he returned to Argentina with a third-class ticket and without a penny in his pocket. The banks, not knowing what to do with the decayed hotel, passed it on to each other until, in 1953, they sold it for 14 million pesetas to a group of Mallorcan businessmen and investors, led by Joan Buadas. The same year, Adán Deal died in Buenos Aires, far from his dream. From Formentor I go to the beaches of Alcudia. The Roman conquest of Alcudia and Mallorca was carried out by the Roman consul and general, Quintus Cecilius Metellus, who later received the nickname of Balearicus, on the pretext that the Balearic Islands were a refuge for pirates, in 123 BC. The interest of the Roman Empire to include the Balearic slingers in its troops is also considered as a reason for the campaign, since their ability with the sling was well known to the Romans, due to the scourges received during the contests of Punic Wars. However, the true purpose of the raid was to establish a wedge in Phoenician trade. Another series of reasons must be added: the military strategy of having a sea route to Hispania, since it was extremely difficult for them by land, given who were at war with Gaul from Narbonne. Metellus, knowing the skill of the islanders with the sling, ordered to cover their ships with skins, forming a kind of tent where they could take cover to avoid the projectiles launched and thus be able to disembark on the island. It was very difficult to find the inhabitants, since they still lived wildly in caves. From the military perspective, it is to be assumed that the invasion did not pose a real difficulty for the well-organized and armed Roman troops against the indigenous population, whose best defense was the use of the sling and little else, in addition to being a completely tribal and with lower organizational capacity. Likewise, some sources emphasize the great slaughter of inhabitants and destruction of the indigenous sanctuaries located in Sun Cario, Sun Favar and Roca Ratja. After a 2-year campaign, in 121 BC, he incorporated the islands into the province of Hispania Superior, and founded the city of Palma, today the island's capital, and also Pollença, which was the capital after the conquest, with 3,000 Roman colonists, Iberias Romaean, brought from the Iberian Peninsula, as well as soldiers from the Pompeian legions, such as the Legio Vernacula. Anyway, since the origin of the families belonging to the elite came from Italy, specifically from the Piceno area, some historians have estimated that many of the settlers were also brought from there, specifically from one of the 35 Roman tribes, known as Velina.